Yeah.
You're describing consciousness of our consciousness as being in need of a lack of individuation.
Well, it's the issue between individuation and ego. And I think your question implies a confusion of the two. I mean, we glory in our individuality, our uniqueness, our specialness. But the ego is something else. The ego is something which seeks to actually empower itself at the expense of other people. And so, there has to be a trade-off. I think the glory of Western civilization is our empowering of our uniqueness, the unique artistic vision, the unique scientific vision. The appalling thing about Western civilization is how we have, taken the worst aspects of dominator society and institutionalized it, and then passed laws which make it almost impossible to overturn it. So I'm not preaching any form of anthill, fascist or communist or otherwise, but I do think, that we over-identify ourselves with things. We over-identify our happiness with objects. One of the great things about psychedelics that is so corrosive to capitalistic values is that psychedelics show you that the best stuff is in your own head. Better than walking down Madison Avenue looking in the windows is sitting in your shabby apartment on 6 dried grams looking in the windows.
When you talk about a transcendental object, things like that.
Well, obviously the world arrives at the surface of your skin as one thing, and then it enters into perceptual channels of distinction. The eyes bring you some data, the ears bring you data, and the idea is that within the brain all these channels are supposed to be recombined to give you the original input. And apparently this is a culturally defined undertaking. In other words, when you think you're thinking the way people have always thought. But in fact, how people think is very much dependent on media and informational biases in the society in which they were raised. I believe most Western people hear themselves think. In other words, they hear the equivalent of a voice speaking in their head, and it speaks their thoughts. When you smoke halfway decent pot or take psychedelics or something like that, you become aware that the processing of incoming audio data shifts slightly toward the visual, and you see what people mean, or their speech seems more colorful. It seems to convey more. And I think whether we process incoming speech by the ear or by the eye internally is a cultural piece of cultural conditioning. And that, in fact, we are in the act of changing over. That, this generation of young people who are always dissed as illiterate are, in fact, print illiterate. But they know more about electronic literacy than the people who are knocking them. And their bias is primarily toward the eye rather than the ear. That's why what we really have are two cultures talking past each other. And I think that psychedelics sort of strip out culturally conditioned styles of sensory processing, and that what we call hallucinations are nothing more than our thoughts beheld to some degree, and that we're not used to beholding our thoughts. We're used to hearing our thoughts. Are nothing more than our thoughts beheld to some degree, and that we're not used to beholding our thoughts. We're used to hearing our thoughts. Yeah. The question is, talk about time speeding up. Maybe we're experiencing the rapture right now. Well, in a sense, that's what I was hinting at. History is a very low-volume version of the rapture. And the 20th century is a slightly higher volume of the rapture. And, the year preceding concrescence will be yet more like the rapture. And the minutes preceding concrescence, probably, hell, it will be the rapture. The universe is seeking some kind of completion at a very, very rapid state. And clearly, technology is now what is driving it. For a long time, it was driven by chemistry. And then, 1.3 billion years ago, it began to be driven by genetics. Biology became the carrier of change on this planet. 20,000 years ago, it moved into what some people call the epigenetic domain. That means change not in the genes. Writing is an epigenetic behavior. Language is an epigenetic behavior. Painting, dance, language, possibly borderline. Quasi-genetic, quasi-epigenetic, as Chomsky implied. The thing that we're not coming to terms with, because it's almost literally, it's unthinkable, is that history is a birthing process. History is a very dramatic, painful, sudden episode where you begin at the top of the birth canal and you're a cheerful nomad herding your cattle across the African plains, worshiping a mother goddess, having your orgies, having your intoxications, so forth and so on. That's us at the top of the birth canal 18, 17, 16,000 years ago. Now, we are at the narrow neck, and we feel like we're being squeezed to death, suffocated. There is not enough water, there is not enough air, there is only pressure, and how in this moment of cumulative global crisis can we imagine that this is simply a passage to a wider domain of being, as different from the world we have known as this world is from the amniotic oceans of the womb. But humanness survives. I mean, humanness is fully present in the womb, fully present in the world, makes the transition through the narrow neck of the birth canal, and we will make the transition, I am confident, through the narrow neck of modern history and into this wider post-historical domain. How much of our foolishness, our religions, our prejudices, our habits we will be able to take with us into that new domain? We don't know. We'll be lucky if we get to keep the body. And I'm for that. But I'm also completely aware it may not go according to my wishes. There may come a moment when there are levels of surrender that are trying to the most crazed among us. But nature is clearly now in the third and final act of her love affair with complexity. And our cultures, our technologies now have such a momentum for the production of this kind of complexity that political decisions hardly matter anymore. That's become a sideshow, and driven by money and scientific understanding, technology has taken the lead. And by technology, I don't mean simply machines. I use McLuhan's definition. Technology is simply the extensions of man. The extensions of man. We are hardwiring the unconscious. We are shrinking the planet to a point We are democratizing the availability of data. We are digitalizing our past so that it doesn't decay, and we are triangulating and anticipating our future and discovering it as we live into it to be more fun than we ever dared imagine, more psychedelic than we ever dared imagine. And I look for this to continue until it just reaches excruciating levels. You put it very well. We are in the shadow of the rapture that is the end of history. And this is the end of this little get-together. Thank you very much.